In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Turns out that a book is more durable than stone. It's more durable than a castle. It's more durable than an empire. You don't get away with anything. And so you might think you can bend the fabric of reality and that you can treat people instrumentally and that you can bow to the tyrant and violate your conscience without cost. You will pay the piper. This is a complicated one because we're in a society now that charges interest.
In the Christian tradition, you are not allowed to lend with interest.
Islamic finance has
Yeah. Well, there has to be ways around it.
But I've been thinking about this quite a bit, honestly, and I don't totally understand it. We have set up an entire financial system based on credit.
That's such a Christian question.
Assalamu alaikum. In today's video, we are watching very interesting video of group of Christian theologians and Jewish scholars discussing the prohibition of interest or usury. And so I want to watch this with you and react and maybe bring Islamic perspective and see what is it that are some of the similarities in our way of thinking and what might be some points where there is misunderstanding.
This is a complicated one because we're in a society now that charges interest. If thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as a usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. The Mohammedan world, the Islamic world, has taken that, a similar idea, to an extreme.
It's very interesting how he puts it immediately. Mohammedan world, they've taken this to extreme, which is a simple idea about usury. So let's see where this extreme is.
Their economic systems aren't reliant on the use of money lent at interest.
Which is true in Christendom until the Reformation.
Right.
In the Christian tradition, you are not allowed to lend with interest within the Christian world, and it's only Calvin, I think, who changed that.
Okay, and so
all kinds of ways around that, though, right?
Islamic finance has
Yeah. Well, there has to be ways around it.
But the question is why?
You see this laughter about Islamic finance. Now, some of this is true because you would have sometimes Islamic financial institutions doing something which is more of a synthetic transaction, something that is not really trade-based and it's really avoiding interest. So to be fair, there are some financial institutions or people who claim that they engage in Islamic finance and they might be doing just something which is in name. But the problem, of course, is that what is the principle? What is this prohibition that you are talking about? Forget people who might deserve rightly criticism, that they are just playing with these rules and so on. What is it that Bible here is saying? Because they're sitting and discussing the Bible and teachings. And as this gentleman who is Christian saying, this used to be a doctrine in church for thousands of years. In fact, church used to excommunicate people, usurers.
That's the question. Why was it important for the early Christians, even though people would always get around whatever rule you put?
Well, it's important so they wouldn't be mafia dons. It's like, pay me 25%, next week or I'll break your legs. That's a bad extension of that property. And maybe if you can set up a system where that's constrained and regulated, then, but this is a pretty stark, it seems like a stark prohibition.
And that's an interesting point. He is here acknowledging that this prohibition of interest, as he quotes from the Bible, is very stark prohibition. So bring that to the point where he says Muslims have taken this to extreme. So when we're talking about this, he's almost criticizing his own religion. The God is prohibiting something in a way that is extreme. So it's a very interesting framing to begin with the whole discussion.
For loaning to the very poor and not for those who will use the money you loan them to do a business with. The assumption is if they make money from your money, then that's a different type of interest
So is
loan.
that why it is to any of my people that is poor by thee?
That's right. It's not a ban on loans.
Right, so it's a ban on...
only with regard to the very poor.
And so here we have Dennis Prager, who is a Jewish scholar, and he is here giving his own interpretation. Now, what is interesting with this interpretation is that between the Jews, they don't believe you are allowed to give interest to another Jewish person. So it's not because he's poor or not poor. He's giving here some different interpretation that, it's because somebody is poor. If he is rich, we could give him. Point here that is missed often is that fundamentally, what is the interest? Interest is taking the profit from lending money. Oftentimes, people like this, or even from the Muslims, they would justify giving the loans for a business and taking interest on those loans if the recipient is either rich or if the recipient is doing this for a business purposes. Now, the core point here is that what is the interest is the money on money. What is the so-called loan from business is not when you give money for the money, is when the profit is linked to the underlying business activities. And this is often in these discussions misunderstood. The loan to the business is not the actual loan then. The loan to the business is then investment. So even if you give a loan to the business and you charge money on top of that money, regardless of what's happening with business activities, that's still loan, that's still interest. And that is also prohibited amongst the Jews themselves.
So basically, it's really an injunction for charity.
I see. So
That's
it's
really what it
don't
is.
charge people below the poverty line 30% on their credit cards.
Sounds right.
So
Here, he is right in a sense because the loan, like we call Kar Hasan, is a charity. You should consider that as a charity, not commercial tool. So the question here is that contradicts his previous statement, but for the business, it's okay. Well, how do you link charity with the business? So it's either charity and it's non-profit and it's in line with that, or it's a business tool. Business tool is not charity, it's not loan. So from Islamic perspective and from original idea here is that the loan is for charity, for helping. That's why it's not commercialized. You cannot use that tool and commercialize it and say, now it's okay. So the purpose here is that for money really to be useful must become some asset and its profit must be linked with underlying real economic activity, the performance that business is doing, something that business is actually making. So you're eating from the fruit of that business. Then that is investment. That's not a loan. You tie yourself with the business, with the risk of running that business, with its fruit, and also risk of going down. And that is not the case with the loan, with the interest, because you're guaranteeing the return and the principal as well.
I've been thinking about this quite a bit, honestly, and I don't totally understand it. But what I do understand is that the fact that we set that aside in the contemporary world, and the fact that we have set up an entire financial system based on credit, it seems to accelerate reality. It seems to have an effect on the way in which we live. Because what credit does is that you're borrowing from the future. That's what you're doing. You're saying, I don't have this now. I'm going to get it from outside of me, and I'm going to pull it to myself. And then what it does is it creates a strange wheel that seems to accelerate. And I think that the acceleration of the modern world seems to have something to do with credit.
Well, it has something to do.
This is the key. You see, he is genuinely looking for the answer. He's saying here, why did we prohibit this money giving birth to more money, the credit, the growth of that compounding and all of these things? There seems to be something strange. And he's recognizing here that the underlying tool that we use to finance or do these other types of interest-based loan is creation of the credit. It's a money-for-money transaction. So he's here struggling with sort of the same idea, with the same concept, differentiation of creation of the credit money for money, and when money is actually moving through the business and it's being invested.
To do with the efficiency of financial markets, and certainly the provision of credit. Well, it is greasing the wheel. I don't think anybody would dispute that. Your point is that...
You see, Jordan Peterson has very strange view. So his comeback is that this creation of the credit, this use of interest to finance business is greasing the wheel of economy. So remember where he started from. The God prohibited, very stark, Muslims taking it to extreme. Why are they doing this when this is greasing the wheel? Right? So the economy overrides revelation here, basically. And this is the program where they are explaining, trying to take the wisdom and ethics and values from the words from the Bible. Yet what they are doing, they are undercutting its value and the message.
Is that there's a danger in that we're not contending with, that it's an artificial acceleration of the rate of transformation. We risk doing that to such an effective degree that we might not be able to cope with the consequences.
Because the way that states do it is particularly visible, right? It's like what you're doing is you're just putting your problem on the future. You're basically taking your problem, throwing it out, and saying, "Oh, we'll deal with this later." And so there's something about credit which has that structure.
To be clear,
Which think about it in somebody who's irresponsible with credit. That's what ends up happening, right? It's like they borrow. It's like, yeah, I've got a car, I've got this, I've got that, and then all of a sudden it hits.
So you see, the now discussion goes into the irresponsible borrowing. Is economy going to work?
The way in which states do it seems to be playing over a longer period of time, but we can see the wall coming, and we don't quite know what it's going to look like when, financing of the debt is equal to the GDP of a country or something crazy like that, which is completely possible that it will happen.
And we enter now into the major problem that results from this financial economy, where we are entering the era of financialization, where financial assets are growing from personal debt, government, corporate debt, synthetic transaction, leverage debt, all of speculative trading that is going on. So this financial economy is growing so big that when you compare it to the real economy is tiny. Planet Earth, everything that we have is tiny proportion of this new financial economy. And we have seen that during the global financial crisis, they would create derivatives, the derivatives of the derivatives, and CDOs and everything that grew exponentially. People were then betting on these financial assets that brought entire economy to the halt. And how do you finance this? You need to create more of these products, financial economies. And so we have this entire parasite living on the back of a little tiny planet where everything that we produce cannot even make enough return just on the current financial assets that we have. So they are noticing this growth, but they don't seem to see that the way to fight against that is to reverse the effects of financialization.
Happen at some point.
to be clear, there's not a prohibition against loaning and borrowing here. You're allowed to loan money.
It's not here prohibition of loaning and borrowing money, all right? You are allowed, but what?
Just not without interest.
Yeah.
And I take it what you're saying, John,
And that should be the end of it, right?
for whatever benefits might be described on the other side in terms of efficiency and so on, I'm not persuaded there shouldn't be interest. What it does is it accelerates, it makes easier, it incentivizes borrowing, right? Because you might make money. We've got to be clear here that this is going to disincentivize
But it also,
borrowing, right?
like what I mean by it accelerates is that it accelerates, right? It's like I borrow $5 and now I have to pay back $7. So I have to produce more than what I needed in the first place in order to pay it back. So think about that cycle. If you make it into a system, it creates a cycle that just will necessarily accelerate.
Well, and that's incredible point. That's really, he's trying to come up to the logic, to the basics, where everybody is kind of running away.
Enormous service has been done on borrowed money and fortunes made. So I think Dennis's distinction is fundamental, right? If you live on your credit card so you can party more, that'll bite you.
I mean, I have a credit card. I'm just trying to understand why Christians would have banned this for 1,000 years.
You know what's interesting? These are the scholars of the Bible, scholars of theology from both sides. And you get a sense that they didn't understand the economics impact of interest. They don't know their own history. They're struggling to define why it was prohibited. What was the wisdom? They're reaching out and they're trying, if you take a little bit, a lot, if it is for economics, if for business. They're mixing, they can't pinpoint surgically exactly. I mean, you have in the Bible situation where Jesus going into the temple and he threw out the money changers. Why did he change that? Why did he throw them out? they were not dealing with the poor people. They were not with the oppressed. They were people in that temple who would come on pilgrim, and they tried to exchange their shekel silver coins because they had stamp of pagan gods and so on into the other clean coins without these symbols. So they were travelers. They were not poor. They were not oppressed. They wanted this transaction, something that benefit. And these people who charged them on that silver, more silver. So that was unequal. That's riba. So when Jesus said, you made this place a den of thieves, who is he talking about? He's talking about these traders who are engaging in unethical financial activities. So you have a Jesus who is portrayed as very, how would Jordan Peterson say that? He is like these Muslims, very extreme in his reaction. Why did he take out Wall Street bankers from this? What's he supposed to do? And that's what they are trying to do. They want to invite as if Wall Street is Jesus approved and this is now the new. What is it that we are doing? And again, this is in a setting where they are trying to discuss religion, trying hopefully to understand the word of God and act accordingly. But they do everything but.
If people borrow money to start businesses all the time, and they build a life for themselves that way.
So put money as an investment. Let's partner in your business, not borrow and lend, but put money in the business and eat from the fruit that business makes. And this whole idea also that what made many countries prosperous, what built the economy is debt. It's not true. Even today, most of money that builds these startups is actually equity, investment. Somebody putting money in the startups and so that they will grow and they risk and maybe it goes up or down. Sometimes from 10 startups, maybe half fail. But that's how even today, most of the companies that we use that are some of the largest started with equity. When does the debt come? Debt comes when it's large, the host body is large. So this parasite starts extracting the wealth when you already have assets, collateral, and you already are at that mature level. That is when debt become more prevalent. But even today, entrepreneurship, risk-taking is what builds economy. So these kinds of statements are stereotypes. What they are saying, God didn't know what kind of economy we will have today, so these laws that he put was for some other time.
And bankers are pretty good at figuring out if they can pay the money back, and they bear the cost if they can't. So that, it's different than
Usury.
running up your credit card bills, right?
And it's different from loaning money to people can never pay it back and enslaving them permanently as a consequence.
And Dennis says, according to the Torah, that if you loan money to people that can't pay it back, that the poor people, you can't charge them interest. Because in that case,
that's the law.
In that case, it's not an investment, right?
In Talmud, it's talking about interest as one of those deadly sins. That person there is a capital punishment for somebody who engages that. And it's very clearly said, just like what we in Islam today say, it's not just one who gives, it's one who takes as well. It's one who witness, who's guarantor. All of these people who give it legal status are responsible. So for Dennis to say, he full well knows that is clearly prohibited, not just one who is giving, but one who is taking everybody else, and they, between themselves, don't allow it. I think he's just playing here some kind of a role where, doesn't want to offend. It is not clear for me what he's trying to do.
That Jews amongst themselves do not loan on with
it's
interest.
Fascinating you should ask.
That's exactly what I just said. Jews amongst themselves don't loan. In fact, they also I have seen some of their contract for buying the houses and everything where the rabbi structured this more like a sales contract. Okay, just like what we have in many countries today, when Islamic finance company, what they try to do is structure transaction to be like a sales transaction or investment.
Well, through the 20th century, one of the first things every Jewish community set up was called a Jewish Free Loan Society, where the poorest Jews got loans without interest. Mm-hmm. And that was what it was called, a free loan society. And it was understood that you don't take advantage of this to make money on the money we give you, that you need it to live. So, as I said, it's essentially a charitable but it's a beautiful thing. It's better than charity because it keeps your dignity. You didn't get charity from the community, you got a loan. So you have to pay it back. Charity you don't have to pay back. So there's a beautiful thing that charity is being called a loan in this verse.
So this is the end of the clip. Now what you will notice here is that this Christian is asking him, a Jew, but between Jew and Jewish, in your faith, in your understanding, between you don't charge each other. But what he didn't say is that for them it's allowed to charge a Christian interest, right? So I guess the conversation would be much awkward. And that's actually what Shakespeare is talking about, because in Europe, while Christians, it was prohibited for them and they didn't want to do anything, they would bring Jews to Europe, and then Jews would not do it amongst themselves, but what they would do, they would give loans to the Christians. So the whole story became this young Christian who wants to get married. He goes to the money lender and he gives him money. He can't repay it, and he's asking for to repay him through the flesh of his body. My reaction to this is that they don't understand fundamentally the mechanics of the difference between what makes riba, that it's a loan, it's a giving money for getting more money. It's not supposed to be commercialized. When you give money into the business, it's investment. It shouldn't be called loan. Investment into the business is that money becomes that equity. You break the link between money and money. And so even when Muslims sometimes go to Islamic bank, for example, and say, I want to do home loan, it's technically a wrong idea. It's a home loan. It should be home financing, because the bank, if they do it properly, should be engaging in buying that property and selling you and engaging in real sort of transaction. So just understanding the two transactions here and placing them in the right context, I think would clarify this misunderstanding. And I think looking at the words of God and this eternal message that we find in the scriptures, we should actually think that the fact that we see the impact of financial crisis and what interest is doing to the people, countries, and society, a possibility for exploitation, harming other people, acquiring wealth in unethical ways. The fact that we don't realize and understand why Allah talks about riba as a war, as a destroying sin, and the fact that we think that we cannot run economy without it, it just speaks to our lack of imagination how devastating riba is. And the question one should be asking is not, how can I run economy without the interest? The question we should be asking is, how is it that this economy still runs with so much interest? So many people just sucking the profit without real engagement in real economic activities of those businesses. If I believe interest is wrong, I will not just abstain from it with my brothers or another Muslim. I don't want to enter into that transaction with a Christian or Jew or anybody else. Because if something is wrong, if something is not ethical, then it's unethical in every circumstance, no matter. I don't have one set of ethics when I deal with Muslim or another Muslim. Or I give you the rotten product, bad product to this person and the good product in that person. I have ethics that I deal with everybody in the way that I believe is the right thing. I treat everybody in the right way. And this is the essence of trust in society. I don't think it works if we have these hidden ethics, hidden ways when we deal with each other. Thank you for spending time to watch this video. If you would like to learn more about finance and economy from Islamic perspective, head to our new platform, Muslim Money Matters, where we go in much greater details regarding the content. Until next time, my name is Almi Cholan. Assalamu alaikum.